So, hello everybody. Today is another Chits and Cats Soundbites. And those of you who are listening to this will probably have recognized the track that I was just playing. It's Twin Peaks theme by Angelo Badalamenti. And those of you who are watching will probably have recognized Laura Palmer, also a very iconic picture, I think, from the beginning of the 90s. I was born in 1973, so I was about 18 when the series finally aired in Germany. And I recall that you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't take any tube, you couldn't take any tram, you couldn't get on any bus without driving past pictures of Cheryl Lee, aka Laura Palmer, dead, wrapped in plastic on a beach somewhere in what I only recently learned was the Seattle area of Washington State in the United States. I don't usually talk about films or music or TV on my channel, simply because they don't play a very important role in my life. I mean, I do have a TV and I even have a satellite dish, but I haven't watched TV since Christmas, actually, when my mum was over and we were watching Sherlock. Um, it's just because I don't know, there is nothing really out there that I'm interested in currently. Every so often something comes up that I find interesting. Last year I was very fascinated with Stranger Things, and I also did a short video on that one because I think it's a really, really well-made series. But Twin Peaks is one of the series that I grew up with, and it's a very short series. For those of you who do not know Twin Peaks, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about the first two seasons, and I'm going to definitely talk about Fire Walk with Me, which is the movie that came out in 1992. For those of you who were born after 1992 and are completely new to this, but may have heard about Twin Peaks because its third season will premiere on March 21st, 2017, which is 25 years after the end of the second season. So it's probably the show with the longest break between seasons. And you haven't watched seasons 1 and 2, but are going to watch season 3, I would suggest you try and get a hold of seasons 1 and 2. And if you're over 18, also Fire Walk with Me. If you're under 18, seasons 1 and 2 only, to prepare, because I don't think you will be able to appreciate the third season if you don't know what Twin Peaks is really about. Now, I didn't know that there was going to be a 3 season, I think, until 3 weeks ago. And I came across this completely by accident when I was sitting and working on my studies, and I was looking for some music to play. And I went to YouTube and I Googled Twin Peaks, the original soundtrack, and I was listening and I was looking at the results that it got. And a whole world opened up to me, because there are so many channels out there that discuss Twin Peaks, its meaning, its hidden meanings, its background, its background in theosophy, and what Mark Frost's own religious and metaphysical thoughts are on God, the world, probably 42, and dolphins and fish. And the same for Lynch. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. I'd kind of always remembered Twin Peaks, but I'd never seen Fire Walk with Me. And I hadn't even thought about the series for a very long time. And so I got into watching a lot of meta material on the series, people discussing its meanings, people even, like there were interviews with cast and crew. And I also learned over the last 4 weeks that David Lynch and Mark Frost had never really wanted to reveal who killed Laura Palmer, that this wasn't even part and parcel of what they had set out to do, and that they also had to kind of make it up as they went along, because apparently also the network told them, ABC told them, well, people want closure, people want to know who killed this lady, otherwise what's the point? Because even I recall that while it's called Twin Peaks, the question was never so much, oh, what's going on in Twin Peaks, and what are Andy and Lucy up to, or how's Sheriff Truman today, or what's Dr. Jacoby listening to on his radio today. It was always who killed Laura Palmer, and at least in my case as well, and why was she killed? But over the last couple of weeks, I learned that this was not really necessarily the intention of Lynch and Frost, and that they then had to come up with a killer. And there was also a very interesting series of interviews where people were saying that they didn't know who the killer was. So Cheryl Lee said she didn't know who had essentially killed her character. And also that it was never planned for Cheryl Lee to play any role in Twin Peaks. She was hired for 4 days to play a corpse and to play the living Laura Palmer in a snippet of maybe 10 seconds in a video that's shown at some point with her and Donna at a picnic. But David Lynch was very, I guess, impressed with Cheryl Lee. So he said, would you like to come back and play Maddie, who is the almost identical cousin of Laura Palmer, and who comes back and then later on is murdered in a very terrible and graphic fashion. And I remember having nightmares for a long time after that. So Cheryl Lee said she didn't know who had killed Laura Palmer, and she was in effect Laura Palmer. And other people were saying, well, we didn't know either. And then there was this interview with Ray Wise, who plays Leland Palmer, Laura's father, who said, yeah, and and I was always wondering, who killed Laura, and I was just hoping, hopefully it wasn't me, because it would mean that I essentially killed my daughter. And at the time he had, I think he and his wife had just had their second child, and he was like, this idea of being a child killer bothered him, which is quite understandable. So I got more and more back into Twin Peaks. I bought the 2 seasons on DVD, and I rewatched them. The second season only in part. And I also watched for the first time Fire Walk with Me. And I'm now 44 years old, and of course my life is now very different from what it was like when I was 17, 18 watching it for the first time. And I think that when I rewatched it, I had a lot of aha moments, and I also saw the whole series in a very different light, especially also given the fact that for the first time I saw in my life, I was able to watch Fire Walk with Me, which is essentially, if you like, a prequel, because all during Twin Peaks, Laura Palmer's dead. Twin Peaks starts with Laura Palmer having been discovered, her dead body having been discovered, and the investigation that tries to find out how she was killed. And then all kinds of other weird things happen as well, and side plots develop. There's a sawmill that's burnt down, and there's, I don't know if it's insurance fraud or whatnot, and other things are happening as well. But to me, they were always more distractions, whereas apparently Lynch and Frost wanted Twin Peaks to be kind of like a soap opera and spin away from Laura Palmer's death. And, Laura Palmer's death maybe being the entryway into Twin Peaks, but not the reason why people would watch Twin Peaks. I think in my case, at least, they were completely mistaken. I couldn't care less about the Leo Shelley side plot. I just didn't care, and I didn't care about Ed and Nadine, and they were all important characters because they were in Twin Peaks and they brought the city to life, or the town to life. But to me, it was always about who killed Laura Palmer. It's a whodunit. Why was she killed and by whom? Anyway, and in essence, there is a mythology that underlies Twin Peaks, which you may or may not subscribe to. It is revealed over the course of the series that it was in fact her father, Leland Palmer, who kills Laura Palmer. But it is revealed, and you can or cannot believe this, and I'm going to tell you what I actually take away from it now, 25 years later, or how I see it. And I'm not saying that I'm right, but this is what I actually take away from the movie and the series, that Leland Palmer is possessed by an entity named Bob, played by Eric Silver, who is visible and who's kind of like a demon, but he doesn't necessarily appear to many people. I think in the series he's only seen by Leland himself, by Leland's wife, by Maddie. And I think in the unaired part, or in the European part of the pilot, he's also seen by Agent Cooper, by Sheriff Truman, and by a man named Mr. Gerard, who's a shoe salesman, who is also kind of possessed, as we learn later, by an entity called Mike. And they seem to be demons, and they definitely behave quite demonically. At least Bob does. Mike seems to be. Mike says he saw God and then he became good, and now his whole job in life and his purpose is to stop Bob from killing. And it's revealed that Leland Palmer, when he was a boy, he went vacationing at his grandfather's house on a lake somewhere, and there was an empty house next to them, and there lived an old man who he identifies as Bob, who threw matches at him and said, "Would you like to play with fire, little boy? Would you like to play with fire, little boy?" And Leland says, "Well, and I invited him in, and when he was inside me, I didn't know." And it's essentially demonic possession that we're talking about, and this demon made Leland Palmer kill his daughter, because it becomes clear in the film. It's not so clear in the movie. It's not so clear in the series that Bob also wants to possess Laura Palmer, but Laura kind of, for some reason, manages to withstand him and to block him. And so, because he can't possess her, he forces Leland Palmer to kill her. And then Leland Palmer dies in the series, and then the police officers have a discussion about it, and Sheriff Truman, I think, is the one who says, well, or is it Albert? I don't know. One of them anyway says, well, but what is this? Is this like real? Is Bob real? Is he out there somewhere? And then Agent Cooper says, well, it doesn't really matter if it's him or if it's not him, but we have to stop whoever commits these crimes. And if it was Leland Palmer, it goes without saying that they've essentially stopped him, because he's now dead. But not after he's killed Laura Palmer, Teresa Banks, and also Maddie. As far as we know, he may have killed others as well. And Agent Cooper says something very memorable when people say, well, it can't be a demon. I mean, demons don't exist, right? I mean, this is not possible, is it? And he says, well, what is better, or what should we prefer to believe? That there are demons that possess people, and that Leland Palmer was possessed by a demon that made him kill and rape his daughter, not in that order, or that a father would rape and kill his daughter. What's better? And I find this a very important statement to make, because and especially after having watched the movie Fire Walk with Me, actually don't really subscribe to this whole demon idea. And here's why. In the film Fire Walk with Me, we see the last 7 days of Laura Palmer on this earth before she is killed. And we learn quite a lot about this young lady. Some of the things have been hinted at in the series as well. So, for example, she's a cocaine addict. She is definitely promiscuous. She works as a prostitute. She is hell-bent, it seems, on self-destruction. She has uh, multiple sexual partners at school. There is Bobby, there is James, but she also goes to really unsavory places. She works at least once in a kind of brothel across the Canadian border called One-Eyed Jack's. She in the film she's seen going to, you know, I don't know if there are brothels or places where you can pick up women. I don't really know what they are. Something that looks kind of like a nightclub, but everybody's having sex. It looks like an orgy. It's a little bit difficult sometimes even to understand what's being said because the music is quite loud in those scenes, it and we're talking about somebody who's probably only just 18. I mean, we're talking about a teenager here. And we're also seeing a different side to Leland Palmer in the movie, in that he is actually he's very controlling of his daughter. I mean, there's a scene where he says, well, nobody will start um, eating dinner until Laura has washed her hands. And I mean, her hands are absolutely clean. There is something really weird going on there. There's a vibe there that isn't present, of course, in the series, because we never see the two of them together alive because Laura's already dead. So we see a very different side to their relationship. And we also see Laura interacting with her secret friend, who she entrusts her secret diary to. And in this scene where she's with Harold, that friend, she says, well, Bob is trying to kill me. And he says, well, Bob isn't real. And she says, oh, he is real. He's real. He has been having me since I was 12. So she is actually talking about having been sexually abused for probably the last 6 years by this man named Bob. And she says, and he's onto me, and he's, you know, he wants me dead. And then there's a scene where Leland Palmer, it's evening. His wife is sitting at a dresser, and she's taking off her makeup, and she's dressed in a nightgown, and he comes in also in night clothes and in a nightgown as well. And he hands her a glass of milk, and she starts drinking, and then she stops, and then he's ever so slightly putting his hand under her hand that's holding the glass and pushing it slowly and very gently towards her mouth to make her drink up. And then there's a cut, and in the next scene, you see her lying in bed having what seems like really animate dreams, or maybe even a nightmare. And then she opens her eyes, and then she sees this white horse standing in the middle of the bedroom. And of course, to me, this spells out he has been drugging his wife, because in the next scene, I think it's almost the next scene, we see Laura Palmer lying in bed and Bob climbing in through her first floor bedroom window. So for Americans, this would be the second floor bedroom window. So he actually needs to climb up the wall on the outside of the house to enter her window, and he's raping her. And it's actually quite graphic. So spoiler warning again, and trigger warning. If you want to watch this movie, you need to be over 18, and it is very graphic. And she keeps saying, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? You know? And then suddenly, it's almost like somebody has taken a veil off of her eyes. She sees her father's face, and she recognizes him. And to me, just these couple of instances of how Bob appears and who he appears to and who sees him And this is only the movie, and this is very important because in the series, other people see him too. But in the movie, it's just the people who live in the Palmer household who see him. And to me, it's almost like Laura Palmer, and then there's another significant scene at the very end or towards the very end. Laura Palmer has two diaries. One is the secret one, which is with Harold, who then later on reads to Donna from it in the series. And then she has a kind of like official diary. And one day she goes home because she has kind of like an encounter with a really weird person and her grandson. I'm not going to go into that encounter. Anyway, she's told that the man behind the mask is looking for the book with the pages torn out. So she goes back to her house and she sees Bob trying to steal her diary, her official diary, in which someone has torn out several pages, namely the pages apparently that refer to Bob. And towards the end, just pretty much before she's killed, we see she's in this burnt out railway track with her father, who's, tied her up, and all kinds of things are going on. And he holds up the torn out pages from her diary to her, and he says, "Your diary, all these years I thought you knew it was me." So this kind of is very different from the series, because in the series it's almost like Leland Palmer keeps saying, well, when he was inside I didn't know, it's almost like he's saying whenever he's possessed by Bob, he doesn't know what's going on. Now, if we assume that Bob possesses him every single time he rapes his daughter, he wouldn't really know what's going on. He might find out after the fact somehow, but I quite doubt that. It doesn't make sense to me. But in the movie, it comes out that he knows exactly what's going on. So this whole, oh, someone made me do it, Bob made me do it, Twinkies made me do it, isn't really working because he is at least partly aware of what's going on. So to me, this casts a very different light on this Bob thing, because I get the feeling, or my interpretation of Bob, because I'm not like into this whole demon thing, it's too easy a way to explain evil, in my opinion, to say, well, there are evil entities out there. I think evil is in all of us, and it's inside of us, and it will come out if we don't keep it in check. So what I believe Bob is, or how I like to see him, is that he is actually a person Laura Palmer has created, a persona Laura Palmer has created, her subconscious has created, so that she can cope with the fact that she's a victim of sexual abuse at the hands of her father, by blocking out the fact that it is actually her father and creating this different entity, because she cannot cope. And I think it's very difficult to cope for anyone with the fact that you're being raped by your father. I mean, that is a terrible thing, So it's somehow a kind of psychological safety mechanism to ensure that she doesn't break down completely. And she's sharing this with her mother, who knows something's going on. I think she even knows that there is something in the milk which will make her sleep really deeply. She knows something's going on, but she refuses to accept the truth. And in a way, Laura's behavior of being very promiscuous, of going out there prostituting herself, of having sex, is almost like she's trying to self-destruct, because she's blaming herself. If I was a good girl, this wouldn't be happening to me, so I must be a bad girl, so I must die. So in a way, I think she does have a death wish. But over those last 7 days towards her end, she actually becomes an agent, and she pushes back. And there's a scene where she says to her father, "Stay away from me." and she realizes she's completely rejecting her father and Bob, if he's real or not, doesn't matter. She is rejecting her father, and she is coming close to maybe even realizing who Bob is, and she finally does realize who he is. And then there is a scene where she says, and tonight is the day I die. I think this is, or I'll die tonight. And I think this is part of her diary, which she leaves with Harold, which is then later found in the series. So she knows that she has now identified her abuser. She knows who it is, and she knows he knows. So he really needs to get rid of her. She realizes that her dad, who's a lawyer, cannot go on living while she knows what he has done. So I think she knows that her days are numbered now that this whole pretense of Bob doesn't work anymore, that she has recognized the truth and realized the truth and knows what's going on and knows who her abuser is and has made it known to him, because I think Leland knows as well that he has been recognized by her. And he's very surprised, even saying, well, I always thought you knew, you know. And so now it comes to a head. And this idea of, him saying, oh, yeah, Bob made me do it because he wanted to possess Laura. I don't know if this is really true. I think it's more like Laura realizes that she might have evil inside of her, like we all do, but it might come out. And so she kind of has to almost end it there, you know. And in the very end, and this is a very interesting ending as well, she's in what we have come to know as the Red Room, or some people call it the Black Lodge. It's the room with the red curtains and the really strange pattern on the floor. She sees an angel, and there's a conversation that she has with Donna about angels and how the angels have all gone. And then there's another scene where there's an angel in the train car where she and Ronette Pulaski are held prisoner by Leland Palmer. And this angel appears, and suddenly all of their ties fall away, and Ronette is able to escape. Unconscious, she falls out of the train car, but she survives in the end. She's the one who gets away. And it's almost like, you know, Laura has now come full circle, and she is now in a place where nothing can reach her, where she is at peace, because she has had a hell of a life. I mean, let's face it, we're talking about the victim of sexual abuse, of several years of sexual abuse. You know, she needs peace, and she can only find this peace in death, which is a terrible, terrible message, but which may be true. I mean, we do know that people who suffer abuse, sexual or otherwise, quite often do kill themselves, either by proxy, by living a very, very unsafe life, by taking drugs which kill them, or by actually outright just jumping off a cliff or hanging themselves because they cannot find peace in this world anymore. And to me, this is what I take from this series. It's, you know, and from the whole Twin Peaks storyline. In the series, especially in the second part of the second season, a lot of wacky things happen. You know, there's talk of aliens, and there's stuff going on where I don't even now recall how I reacted to it back then. But looking at it now, to me, it's a complete distraction from what, in my opinion, Twin Peaks, or what I take away from Twin Peaks, what Twin Peaks means to me. It is the story of a terrible, terrible crime that has been committed against, and repeatedly committed against, this young woman, and how she deals with it, and how it ends her life. And this is a real tragedy. This is what this story is about. It's a human, deeply human tragedy. And everything else is just byproducts, which are not important, and which, to me, they personally distract me from the true tragedy that is Twin Peaks. and I may be completely alone with this, because it also goes completely against this whole story of, the watcher on the threshold and the black lodge and the white lodge and, what did the log lady see and what do the owls mean? I don't care about any of this. I actually truly and deeply care about Laura Palmer and what happened to her and what a terrible life she had and how it ended. And I recall seeing a documentary about a forensic pathologist, and she only gets the victims to look at. She doesn't look at any other dead bodies. She just looks at people who have been victims of crimes. And she basically says, she's asked, so how do you cope with this? And she says, well, I'm a Christian and I'm religious, so I go to church every Sunday. And when I see the person before me, it's always a person. It's never a body. It's a person. And I know that whatever happened to this person before they died is over now. And they are now in a place where no one can touch them and where they are at eternal peace. And of course, this is her belief. And if you don't share her belief, then you'll go, yeah, well, for all we know, they're just gone. But for her, it's important, there is such a thing as an immortal soul. And when a person dies, this person's soul goes to what Christians refer to as heaven and is in the presence of the Christian God. And if you believe in Christian doctrine, in the presence of God, there is eternal peace and bliss and happiness. This is a state that is perfect. You forget there is no negativity there. There is no pain there. There is no sorrow there. There's no suffering there. And that's how she deals with all of the terrible things that she sees on a daily basis. And when I watched Fire Walk with Me, the ending really reminded me of this. And also, in a way, when you look at the picture of Laura Palmer in death, this iconic picture that was posted everywhere in the 90s, in the early 90s when Twin Peaks was airing in Germany. It was everywhere. It was on newspapers, on magazines. It was, the iconic symbol of Twin Peaks was not the sign Twin Peaks population 52,001 or whatever it was, but it was the face of a dead woman wrapped in plastic. And it is a very peaceful face, and it is a very still face, and a face that doesn't look like a victim either. It looks like, there are hardly any bruises that can be seen. Very much unlike Ronette Pulaski, who's very bruised. And also, when you watch the film and you see the ending, you kind of wonder, well, she's very, very, in a very bad state. There's blood everywhere. But when they find her, there doesn't seem to be a scratch on her. She seems to be sleeping. You know that she's dead because she's really blue in the face. And essentially, the actress really was wrapped in plastic and put on that beach and lay there for hours. So I think a lot of this bluish tint may even have been the cold. But, she doesn't look like a victim. She looks like a strong person who's asleep. We know she isn't. We know she's dead. But I really had to think of this interview with this pathologist when I watched the ending. So, okay, now that's my 2 cents on Twin Peaks. I don't know if I will even be able to watch the third season because it will only be airing on Sky, and I don't have Sky, and I don't even know if I want to see it. But then again, I am curious because apparently Laura Palmer will be in it, and we all know that Laura Palmer's dead. So it's going to be very interesting to see what Laura Palmer is going to contribute to Twin Peaks 25 years after she has been killed. So yeah, that's all from my side. And I wish you a pleasant evening. Bye bye.